Hi, I'm John Pielmeier, and this is the story behind my stories.
You're listening to the Author Stories Podcast, bringing you the story behind the stories and the storytellers.
Margaret White,
Terry Brooks,
Sheena Kamal,
Matthew Quick,
J.T. Ellison,
Walt D. Williams,
Brad Ford,
Corey Doctorow,
Brandon Sanderson,
Robin Hahn,
Ernest Klein, Jim Butcher,
Sherwin Harris.
Visit hankgarner.com for archives of all the shows. Today's guest is
John Pielmeier.
I would really like to thank each of you for tuning in all the time. Those of you that have subscribed over at hankgarner.com, thank you. I appreciate that. It helps other people find the show when you subscribe. There's handy links over the right-hand sidebar at hankgarner.com. I'd like to thank some sponsors today for making all of these shows possible. A huge amount of time, effort, and expense go into producing the show, and it's our faithful sponsors who make all this possible and allow us to bring you 5 shows a week. I don't know many other podcasts that bring you 5 episodes a week, but we're happy to do it. And thank you to our sponsors who allow us to do that. If you would like to sponsor the show, go to hankgarner.com, and there's a handy link up in the menu bar there. Nick Breaker's book Essence, Book 1 Septima, is available now. This is a really unique book that Nick has written. It's kind of the best of science fiction and urban fantasy, mixed with a little bit of romance. It's a really cool mashup of genres that Nick has come up with. I love this book. I think you will too. Book 1 is out now of the Essence series. It's called Septima. And Nick said just the other day that book 2 and 3 are coming very quickly. This is some really, really innovative writing. I think you're going to love it. Go ahead and grab book 1, Septima, now, and be ready for books 2 and 3, which are coming out in rapid succession in 2018. Nick Breaker, Essence, book 1, Septima. Also, The Chronicles of Mirestone is a new collection. If you are like me and love anthologies where you get to sample the work of a lot of different authors, you're going to love this one. If you're also a fan of fantasy, like I am, you're going to love this one. 200 years ago, the dwarven clans of the elvish houses of Mirestone were at peace. The king of the dwarves, in a selfish and greedy move, used his wizards to expand their mountain empire, raising new peaks from the forest floors of their elven neighbors. War and hatred ensue. 6 talented authors lend their voices to a tale of destruction, mistrust, and hope. It's The Chronicles of Mirestone. It's a brand new release. Go pick it up. We're going to hear from some more sponsors later on in the show, and as always, don't forget to stay tuned at the end of the show for a special audiobook clip from Richard Gleaves, the Jason Crane series. Well, thanks for joining me again for the Author Stories Podcast, where I bring you the story behind the stories and the storytellers. Today, I'm really excited to have John Pielmeier on the show with me. John has a fantastic new book called Hook's Tale, being the account of an unjustly villainized pirate written by himself. A wonderful, wonderful book. I'm really excited to talk to you, John. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm thrilled to be here.
John, I begin each show with the same question, and we have to get this question out of the way before we can move on to anything else. And that question is, what is your first memory of wanting to be a writer or a storyteller?
Oh, wow. I don't know that I really have a first memory of being a writer. I wanted to be an actor when I was a kid, but I also wrote a lot. I wrote short stories, and I wrote little plays that I did in my living room. So I always, that impulse was always in me. I never expressed it in the way because I never thought it was possible. I never thought, oh, I can't do that. I can't make a living doing this. That's just not, I don't have the ability or the talent or whatever to do it. Now here I am.
That's why I distinguish between writer and storyteller, I think, because I think for a lot of us there's a gene that's just there, and we want to tell stories, whether that's writing, whether that's acting and conveying something to others, or if it's just entertaining our grandparents. There's something that wants to spin a yarn.
I also believe that storytellers come from storytellers. That I just remember that there were women in my life when I was a little boy who told just great stories. I had an aunt who told terrific stories, and a neighbor lady who was a great storyteller, and my mother would tell me stories every night. So it just was sort of ingrained in my upbringing.
I love that. So many folks that I've had the pleasure of talking to have someone that was an encourager along the way that either sensed the gift and encouraged it, or helped to plant those seeds. And I
need that.
I've not really thought about it so much that storytellers make storytellers. I love that though, but I think you're absolutely right. I think it's contagious.
Yeah, I think every artist, and to some degree, I kind of believe we're all artists or potential artists, but every artist has to have someone to encourage them, to sort of say, yeah, you can do this, or you have this spark in you. That's so important.
Absolutely. You said you wanted to be an actor. What was it about the stage or the screen that appealed to you?
I don't know. I don't know that either. I came from a family of non artistically inclined people so much, and I was sort of a little bit of a freak in that way, I felt. But I was very encouraged by my family at the same time. Nobody ever said, "Oh, you can't do this," or "You shouldn't do this." They said, "Yeah, go ahead."
I love it. My oldest son is 22 now, but when he was about 10 or so, he told his mom and me that he really wanted to be an actor, and that's what he wanted to do more than anything. And so I had a friend who did community theater and things like that. We got him involved, and he just closed a show 2 days ago that he directed. He put together a youth theater troupe, and they put on a show called I Will, which is the life of Shakespeare for to get young people interested in it. And I'm sorry, go ahead.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, and I watched him. I've watched him act all these years, and then he wanted to give the gift to youngsters, and he started teaching and acting. Watching these kids that he recruited and brought up and seeing him pass that gift on to them was just amazing. So that's very much on my mind right now, because we just closed that out this weekend, and that contagious storytelling where all the different forms it comes in. Yeah.
I remember as a child being terrified of telling my parents that I wanted to be an actor. And I kept it a secret for, it seems to me, years. And when I finally told them, they said, okay. It was like, oh, why was I torturing myself all this time, and they were just, they're so encouraging. I don't understand why they were so encouraging to me. I would have probably said, no way.
Maybe they saw that thing in you and said, well, that's just what John's going to do. So,
yeah.
Funny. What you said you wrote short stories and things like that as a kid. What sort of things did you like to read as a youngster?
Oh, well, I read a lot of Hardy Boy books when I was young. That was my sort of favorite boy reading, and I read a lot. I sort of felt some kind of weird obligation to read when it came along, and I started reading encyclopedias and some not very good children's biographies. I didn't have anybody in my life, my young life, like a librarian kind of person to steer me in the right direction. And then all of a sudden, a neighbor lady said, "Come to my library and pick any book you want to read." And I went over and picked out Alice in Wonderland and Alice Through the Looking Glass. And I read those and just fell in love. I read them again and again and again. And that sort of started me on my path to reading sort of more serious fiction.
What do you think it was about Through the Looking Glass and Alice that opened it up for you?
Because it was so imaginative and funny. And it just allowed me to play. I was, I'm an imaginative guy, and I love to. It's great when that imagination is sparked. Even today, I love it when it comes alive.
the element of humor is overlooked a lot. Alice is I guess more of a traditional fantasy, if you want to look at it that way. And when we think of fantasy literature now, some of it is so serious. We've got Game of Thrones, is kind of the touch point now. It's just so serious. And, the fantastical elements, if you can bring someone, put a smile on their face and bring some joy, that's magic.
Even Lord of the Rings is fairly serious. But then you go back to Peter Pan is an incredibly funny play and book for adults as well as kids. I mean, the adults, it's funny for adults in ways that kids wouldn't even understand. And I love it. Whenever I reread Peter and Wendy, which is the novelization that Barry wrote, I laugh out loud. It's so funny and wonderful.
It's wonderful. What part of the country were you born in?
I was born in Altoona, Pennsylvania, which is kind of western Pennsylvania. It's about 40 miles west of State College, which is smack in the middle of Pennsylvania, where Penn State is located.
Kind of pretty blue-collar type of town?
Yeah, it's very much of a blue-collar town, blue-collar family. My dad was a grocer and a butcher. My mom was a housewife, and I grew up very much around blue-collar people. What was great about this town, what I loved about Altoona growing up, is that it felt to me very much like, looking back now, I describe it as growing up on an island. It was very isolated. And we lived not, just a couple blocks from the wilderness, the forest, Appalachia. It's right in Appalachia. And so I would just spend a lot of time in the woods when I was a kid growing up, and that was just great. And I found out that Altoona was actually the last town of its size in the United States to be connected to in the lower 48, to be connected to the rest of the country by anything other than a 2-lane road. That's how isolated, and that was in 1987. So that's how isolated this town was.
That's amazing. Yeah. Being from a place like Altoona, Pennsylvania, when you decided to tell your parents that you wanted to be an actor, where do you go for that sort of outlet?
Well, that was the thing. I was raised a Catholic, and I very much wanted to go to a Catholic university. I went through Catholic grade school and high school, and luckily, Catholic University of America in Washington, D.C. had one of the few speech and drama programs in the country at the time, and I applied to there and was accepted. And it was a great 4 years for me there. And after that, I went to Penn State for grad school, and that was a terrific time too.
What's your graduate degree in?
Well, I have a graduate degree in playwriting, but I did a tremendous amount of acting there, and I actually left the school before finishing my degree at Penn State for an acting job, professional acting job. I professionally for years before I seriously turned to writing. I kind of put my writing on the back burner for the first 20 plus years of my life.
At what point did writing did acting turn to writing for you?
Well, I was, it was funny. I had this, I worked at the Guthrie Theater in Minneapolis. I was an actor there. And that the head of the theater said, we have this empty space that we're not using, theater space. They had a small space, and he said, if there's anything anybody wants to do, go ahead and do it. And I had this play that I've been working on for years and years and years and years. That was sort of my thesis play that I couldn't get off my back. So I said, I'm just going to do a production of this, and I did a production of this play. It's a three-hander play with myself and two other actors, and we kind of co-directed it all together, and it went incredibly well. But what was best about it was it kind of got this play off my back. And right after that, I moved to New York City, and I got an acting job at the Eugene O'Neill Playwrights Conference, which is still going on. It's a play development summer conference in Connecticut. And I went there as an actor, and it was magical. I was so excited to be there as an actor and see all these plays in development and all these playwrights working on their plays. And I left there saying, I'm going to come back here as a playwright. And 2 years later, I did with Agnes of God. And that, when I got the phone call about that my play was accepted at the O'Neill, that's when my life took another direction.
I bet it did. As an actor, what surprised you the most when you started writing plays and you saw the production from the other side? Maybe envisioning the story unfolding and then envisioning, where you're going to place characters and setting and all of this. Did your perspective change being on the other side of the script?
A little bit maybe, but what I really remember are those moments when you're sitting there and seeing this storytelling piece unfold before you, and you realize, wow, that sort of came from me, but the words are coming out of the mouths of other people, and these other people hopefully have made it their own. It's such a magical experience to hear your words and see your play or see your story unfold, but also at the same time realize that it's not just you. It's all these other people involved working on it. And that's just so thrilling, I guess.
Yeah. And as someone who has now is now a novelist, that's a completely different experience because you're putting the story together, the words, but you don't get to hear it acted out by other people.
Well, I acted out myself.
Of course, all great writers do.
I read everything aloud myself just to hear it, and that helps me write it.
I'm a huge proponent of that and acting out the characters, and you really get a feel for, especially with dialogue. If your dialogue is dynamic, and if it's any good, if you read it and it just sounds corny, then it's going to read corny.
Yes.
So tell me about Agnes of God. You wrote that script. Where did the idea for that come from?
Well, I was living in New York City, and at the time I was looking for. I was sort of thinking, well, I want to write a play, and this was right after I'd been to the O'Neill, looking for something to write about that would take me back to the O'Neill as a writer. And I, as I said, I was raised a Catholic, and I had lots of questions about my spiritual development and what spirituality meant in this world. And I remember asking myself, would the saints today, the Middle Age, people in the Middle Ages whom we call saints, would they be considered saints today? Would they be called madmen? And I was asking all these questions, and I wanted to find what I sort of described to myself as a clothesline on which to hang these questions. And one day I was in the subway in New York City, and I saw a headline in the Daily News of the New York Post that said, "Nun kills baby." And I didn't buy the paper. I didn't read the article. I went home, and several months later, I woke up in the middle of the night sort of saying, aha, that's it. That's my clothesline. And went on from there.
Wow. Did you get the sort of outlet for your for the questions of your spirituality from that you hoped that you might from that story?
Well, yes, but I'm still asking all those questions in various ways, and a lot of my plays still explore that area. Not Hook's Tale so much, but certainly Agnes did. I just did an adaptation of The Exorcist, and that also deals in that area. It's about spiritual journeys.
That's awesome. So you that play it was later turned into a movie. I think we're all familiar with Agnes of God. How did that progression happen from the story you're dreaming up to eventually being made into a movie?
Well, I dreamt of the story. I started writing the play, and eventually it took me about 9 months to finish the play, and I sent it into the O'Neill Playwrights Conference, and lo and behold, it was accepted. I went to the O'Neill. It was developed there, and it was then accepted by Actors Theatre of Louisville for a full production, the first full professional production. in Louisville, Kentucky. I did a workshop in Louisville before then, but after the Louisville production, it sort of went so well in Louisville that word of mouth spread around regional theaters. I mean, here's an interesting play that has 3 good parts for women, and is done essentially in a bare stage. I mean, it's pretty inexpensive to do. So I had 6 productions of it regionally. And out of one of those productions, a bunch of New York producers came and saw it, and I got my Broadway production out of that, and it ran on Broadway for about a year and a half, and then the movie happened. So it was sort of just kind of, dominoes.
Yeah. When you have a play go to Broadway, the stakes are obviously higher. Does the production change from when you're doing regional theater to there? I know you said it was sparse, but are you required to, or are you encouraged to, add things and maybe make it more?
No, certainly not in the case of Agnes. I mean, it was a different production because it was a different director and there were different designers. But the space in New York was a very striking set, but it was essentially a bare stage, so it's kind of, and that's how I conceived that play, what I wanted to do with that play, because I really felt I just want the actors to tell the story. I don't want anything else to get in the way of them.
When you're a playwright, and then you turn the production over to a director who's putting it on the stage, and then you have a different crew and director and possibly a different screenwriter who adapts that to the screen. At the end product, is it ever a challenge to watch your work be morphed and turned to different mediums?
Well, that depends. Frankly, it depends on the director and the actors, and you just have to be very careful and lucky and in choosing those people. And I've been, for the most part, very lucky. So
that's great. What did you do after Agnes?
Well, after Agnes, I started writing for television. I wrote a lot of. Much of my career was writing movies for television. My first television movie was a movie of the heart, which was based on, I don't know, some of your listeners may remember that in 1980 there were 4 American churchwomen who were murdered in El Salvador, 3 nuns and a lay woman. And I wrote a movie. This movie is the story of the lay woman who was murdered, and it turned out to be a pretty wonderful piece and a really good experience. And that sort of set me off on my career as a television writer. And since then, I've written 25 plus movies and miniseries for TV.
Wow. Are when you're writing for TV, are these projects that are usually commissioned, or is this new things that you come up with and then sell?
It was usually commissioned. I would come to me with a story, either an original story or an adaptation of someone else's book that I would do.
When you're commissioned to do something like that, what kind of time frame are you working under? And
fairly tight time frame. I mean, I work really well under pressure, under time frames. I know some people don't, but I do. I just get really excited about that. So that ticking clock really motivates me. So that usually is not a problem for me.
How's the process different for writing for television and teleplays as opposed to something that's going to be put on the stage?
Well, there's a lot more input from other people before you get it to the actors, essentially. Assuming that, it's made, there's a certain amount of projects that aren't. They say, well, we're not going to make this. But there's a lot of input from producers, from network, from the network or the cable television producers as well as the independent producers who are hiring you. So you just have to hope that you have good producers and who know how to give good notes. You know, it's a lot of it is about because it's a very collaborative process. That's the nature of it. I know there's some writers who really hate getting notes and being rewritten, and I feel that that's kind of part of the process of that's what this experience is. And hopefully, if notes are good, it'll just make it better.
Yeah.
So that's great.
Hey, authors. You need an author platform. We have talked about this over and over again. You need to have a way to communicate with your readers, and Third Scribe is there to help you do that. They are committed to authors and to readers and connecting the two of them together. You know, there's been a lot of talk lately about some changes going on over at Goodreads and the way that they're handling some of their promotions and book giveaways and going to be charging authors a great amount of money for a service that used to be free. You know, Third Scribe offers a great alternative to that. It's a great place to gather readers where you can talk about the books that you love, and it's a great place for authors to showcase their work and to connect with those readers. ThirdScribe.com is built for readers and writers. It's all about books, and that's all it's about. Go check them out today at ThirdScribe.com. Also, thanks to our good friend Daniel Arthur Smith and Tales from the Canyons of the Damned. Episode 20 is out now. I have a feeling there's going to be a new episode out any day now. You're going to love this series if you like the old pulp magazines. Tales from the Canyons of the Damned expertly grabs that old feeling that you used to get from reading pulp and comic magazines. Go pick it up today, Tales from the Canyons of the Damned. It's my favorite monthly publication. Also, I'd like to thank the Future Chronicles. These are the very cutting-edge collections of science fiction and fantasy. If you want to know where the writers of tomorrow are coming from, they're coming from the Future Chronicles. There's a link over in the right-hand sidebar where you can go collect these amazing collections of stories of the very best speculative fiction, science fiction, and fantasy. Thank you to the Future Chronicles. Our friend Terry R. Hill has two amazing brand new books out, 2 months with Harvey and Joseph of Bethlehem. As Terry was finishing the book Joseph of Bethlehem, which is an amazing book all about the forgotten hero of the Christmas story, and that's Joseph. This is full of great historical research and also a story that will grab you by the heart. Joseph of Bethlehem is the perfect book for this time of year. But when Terry was finishing that book, he and his family were hit by Hurricane Harvey. And for the next 2 months, his community dealt with the fallout and aftermath of this massive storm. And sadly, there are a lot of people in the Houston area where Terry lives that are still dealing with the fallout of Hurricane Harvey. This amazing book is his on-the-ground reporting of what happened during and after Hurricane Harvey. Some amazing pictures told through the lens of social media as the event was unfolding. And the proceeds of this book are going to folks still dealing with Hurricane Harvey. 2 months with Harvey and Joseph of Bethlehem. Go pick them up both from Terry R. Hill, and you can get a signed copy of each of those at terryrhill.net. Now back to the show. Well, I would think that you would learn pretty quickly to not hold your work and your process too precious. You know that.
No, I mean you have to be. It's a totally collaborative process, and it makes better. For example, I recently, a number of years ago, I did an adaptation of an 8-hour adaptation of Ken Follett's *The Pillars of the Earth*. It's amazing book, and I was asked to do a miniseries, limited series adaptation for it, which I did, and the producers hired a director whom I'd never met, and I was on site for the shooting of it all, and this director and I, a director named Sergio Mimitzakazan, we just hit it off so incredibly well. We were just speaking each other's language, and Sergio would give me a note saying, "Well, what about this?" In the middle of about a scene that they were going to be shooting next week, and he'd say, "Well, let's try something along these lines," and I'd go away and write it. rewrite it, and it would just be it would turn out better. It was just a tremendous collaboration, and that's ideally what it should be. You can't control that. You just have to cross your fingers about that. You really don't have any control over that. But
yeah, the Pillars of the Earth series was fantastic.
Thank you.
How did you get
I actually
involved
acted in it too.
Did you really?
Yeah, I'm in it. I'm one of the monks.
Oh, so I'm gonna have to rewatch it now and see if I can find you. Oh, that's great. How'd you get involved with that project?
Oh boy. My agent, my television agent, said to me, I just read this amazing book, and I think we might be able to sell it as a miniseries. I had just written a very successful television movie for FX. It was their first television film that went over very, very well, and my agent said, they want to work with you again. So we sold this project to FX as a 6-hour, and then FX sometime down the line, while I was writing it, said, we've decided not to do any more 2-hour movies and miniseries. So it kind of went into what they call turnaround. And but my agent just loved the piece so much that he said, we're going to try and find another producer for it. And indeed he did. And that worked out tremendously well, and they let me do it in 8 hours. I don't know how I've done it in 6 hours now when I look at the 8-hour result.
I love it. As most stories tend to do, you've kind of come full circle with the new book Hook's Tale, and your publicist sent me some information early on, and the story of how there's a little blurb in there about how you got the idea for this book.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about what that setting was and the scenario that brought this alive to you.
What happened was that my wife and I went on a cruise about 3 years ago, a cruise of the South Seas that went from Chile to Tahiti. A great, terrific cruise. And the very first place we stopped at was an island called Robinson Crusoe Island. It's a small island, part of an archipelago, and it was named Robinson Crusoe Island because and I sort of knew all of this stuff in my odd little brain, that in 1704, something like that, there was a British sailor named Alexander Selkirk. He worked in a privateer, which was kind of a legalized pirate ship, and they were in the South Seas, and Selkirk went to his captain and said, Captain is in really bad shape. I think it's going to fall apart. We need to pull into a bay and do some repairs. And the captain said, no, I don't have time to do that. If you're not happy, get off. So Selkirk became a voluntary maroonee on this uninhabited island. And he lived there for 4 years, providing his own food and clothing himself in animal skins and all of that stuff. And after 4 years, he was rescued, brought back to London. And the British papers in London, and this is around the time that broadsheets started happening in London. So he became, they loved his story. He became the first celebrity survivor in real sense. I sort of describe him as the first celebrity to survive after Jonah. Everybody loved his story for 15 minutes of fame. And Daniel Defoe heard his story and said, I'm going to write a book about this. And he wrote Robinson Crusoe, which is why this island is called Robinson Crusoe Island. And so the only thing you can do in this beautiful island now is hike. So my wife and I were hiking up to a ridge that separates the island, where Selkirk would climb every day and light a bonfire to be rescued. And halfway up this ridge, we stop to catch our breath, and I look out and I see our cruise ship in the bay. And suddenly it just dawns on me in a matter of seconds that, okay, wait, I'm thinking Selkirk sort of may have vaguely mapped this island back in the day, and may have based his Robinson Crusoe map on this island, on Selkirk's description. And I know Robert Louis Stevenson, whom I love, based Treasure Island vaguely on Robinson Crusoe, and J.M. Barrie based Netherland on Treasure Island. So suddenly I thought, wait a minute, I'm hiking on the inspiration for Neverland. And there out in the bay where I saw the cruise ship, I suddenly saw Captain Hook's ship. And we climbed to the ridge, and on the other side of the ridge was Mermaid's Lagoon. And up on the north there was the promontory that was Tiger Lily's village. I got so excited. It was so real to me, this place, that I started asking myself questions right there on the island. Well, wait, if that's Hook's ship, how did he get here? If he's a pirate, who's he pirating? This real island is part of our archipelago. Was Neverland part of an archipelago? And these questions started pouring out of my mind. I was so excited that as soon as we got back from this cruise, I went into my office and I started writing this book.
I love it. Did you tell your wife your idea?
Yeah, I think I did. Yeah, I'm sure I did. I guess I did. Yes. Yes, I remember on the island, I was in the middle of the hike. I said, well, wait a minute. Now I understand why Hook couldn't find the Lost Boys tree. The tree. This is a real jungle island. It's so you could get so easily lost in this place.
Right. We tend to see things through the Disney lens, especially some of these tales that have been kind of rebranded in our imaginations because of that. But I love when you see the original inspiration and it just becomes alive. Did you know that it was going to be a novel initially, or did you maybe think it was a different different format?
No, I never thought of it as anything other than a novel. I'm not sure why, but I didn't.
I love it. That's sometimes it just drops in and you just know, like this is what
I mean,
need
clearly
to be.
It was about storytelling, and it was on such a big canvas. I thought, I can't fit this on the stage, and I'm not going to write this as a spec script for movies or TV, but I can write it as a novel. And that's what I did.
So, was this your first novel?
Well, it's the first novel that's been published. I had written another novel before then that I'm still working on. I haven't really showed anyone other than my wife and one friend. There are three people, including myself, who've read this other book. But so it's technically not my first novel, but in the publishing world, it is my first novel. So,
gotcha. As you started writing, of course, the inspiration was so alive and on fire for you. Did you start taking notes before you lost it?
Well, I didn't really have to. I am so familiar with J.M. Barrie. I wrote a one-man show on J.M. Barrie that I occasionally perform, and I kind of fell in love with Barrie as a writer when I was at Actors Theatre of Louisville, circling back there, and I saw a production there of a fabulous Barrie play called What Every Woman Knows. And I was so excited about this play. I went to the library and got out a collected works of J.M. Barrie and read everything and just fell in love with this man. And right around the time this amazing biography came out called J.M. Barrie and the Lost Boys, which I read and was so moved by his life story that I thought, I've got to write this. So I put together a play that's essentially all Barrie's words. It's just I kind of edited it and put it in a storytelling manner, telling his life story and how included in that is how Peter Pan came about. So I was so familiar with Barrie already and with Peter Pan that I didn't need to do any research on this thing of that nature. The research that I did was of smaller things.
Barrie had a really diverse body of work, and it's really sad that it's not sad that people know him for Peter Pan and the Lost Boys, but it's sad that that's all they know of him.
Well, his plays
guy.
are still done occasionally by his other plays, and they're wonderful. Some of them are wonderful. I saw a production of he wrote the best one-act plays. Probably his most famous is a play called The 12-Pound Look, and I saw a marvelous production of it at the Shaw Festival a couple of years ago. That was just Barrie would have been thrilled by that production. Incredibly funny and kind of moving piece also.
I'm going to look it up. At what point did you realize that this was Hook's story?
I guess right away. I'm not sure why, but certainly Peter's story had been told, and I wasn't terribly interested in Tinkerbell, and I thought, well, Hook. Well, because here's the thing: is that J.M. Barrie people whom I believe don't know him sort of describe him as, oh, he's the boy who never grew up. When in fact, he's a boy, I believe, who grew up way too fast. Barry, I think, identified with Hook, not with Peter. There's a photo of him kind of playing the Hook character with his adopted boys as he was essentially developing the story. So in a way, I thought, well, this is kind of Barry's story too. So it was always about, to me, it was always about Hook.
The subtitle being the account of an unjustly villainized pirate written by himself. What was it about Hook's story as it unfolded to you that intrigued you and made you want to portray him as the unjustly villainized pirate?
Because it's the truth. I just had to, I had to tell, this is a true manuscript. There was so much, I just had so much fun doing this. It was a playground for me. I could tell this story that a lot of people, most people are at least vaguely familiar with the story. So that I could play around with alternative versions of the story to what people know, and at the same time give some interesting origin sources to, why is Smee called Smee? That sort of thing. So that people, I think, because they are so familiar with the original story, at least to a certain degree, they can enjoy my playing around with this in what I hopefully is a very truthful and imaginative way.
As a writer who has been as prolific as you are and have been, writing was not new territory for you, but writing a novelization maybe was. What did you have to learn to acquire in your writer's toolkit for writing in this different medium?
It just came. I never would have thought I never thought I was capable of writing a novel when I was much younger. I didn't find writing descriptive paragraphs terribly interesting. I would get very impatient. I much rather preferred writing dialogue. And as I got older, I guess I just started enjoying the other stuff more. And when I wrote this other novel, which was really my first novel before Hook, I just sat down and said, I'm just going to try something. I haven't really explored this medium. I thought I'll just write a short story. And the story turned into a 400-page novel. It just kept going. It just started pouring out. I had such a good time doing it. It was fun. So when Hook's Tale came along, it was just about having more fun. I was so possessed and inspired by this idea. I couldn't not do it.
What surprised you the most about Hook as his story unfolded to you?
Well, my favorite, to some degree, my favorite character in this piece is Daisy. And Daisy, for those who don't know, haven't read the book, is a name that he gives to a crocodile that he hatches, and his rather affectionate relationship with Daisy, and Daisy's rather affectionate relationship with him through this tale. That surprised me and made me laugh, and eventually kind of made me cry a little bit. Anyone who's ever had a dog or a cat would kind of sympathize with having a crocodile too. I like to think.
Yeah, absolutely. So you get the story done and out. How do you proceed when you have this finished book? What did you decide, that you needed to do with it? There's the big question.
I mean, I didn't have a book agent, so that was the first thing. I had to find a book agent, and that took a little while. And I went to dinner with a friend of mine who said, I sort of over dinner explained what I was looking for, and he said, my friend was a lawyer. He said, I have a client who is an agent. Let me take you guys to lunch. And we hit it off, and this agent read the book, and as he says that when he finished the book, he just fell down on the floor sobbing. He was so moved by it. So I thought, wow, okay. And he said to me, I'm gonna sell this book. And it took a little while, but he found this amazing editor at Scribner, and went on from there. So
the book is fantastic.
It was about belief.
It was what?
It was about belief, about someone else's belief in this book, not just my belief.
Yeah, and as most projects like this are, you think of writing a novel as a very solitary pursuit, and a good portion of it is, but kind of like putting a show on the stage, it eventually takes a cast and crew of other people, pitching in and to move it, from you to everyone else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a point when you just have to sort of unveil the creation and let people, hopefully you start out with friends, with kind people who will read it and give you their kind feedback, and gentle with yourself and with the work, I think, initially.
Sure. And the book has been very well received, with reviews, and you've got some blurbs from some really heavy hitters. What was that feeling like when you realized the book, was received well, and that not only received well, but with other novelists, and that you had found, a place there as well as all the other work that you've done?
I can't describe how joyful it is to hear that someone whom you respect likes what you've done, and it's just a great relief. It can be criticism, and negative criticism, and harsh negative criticism can be so destructive, and it's you just have to say a little prayer that isn't not going to come your way, and all artists are going to meet that at some point in their lives, I think. But when the good stuff comes in, it's heartwarming and encouraging, and it makes you. You need that in order to continue.
Yeah.
You just do.
And when you're able to grab a hold of those little nuggets and hold on to them during those dark days, they really mean a lot.
Oh my, yes.
John, the book is called Hook's Tale, being the account of an unjustly villainized pirate written by himself. I highly recommend this book to everyone. We're going to send everybody to pick up a copy. John, if there are some writers out there listening who are maybe in the early stages of their career and trying to find their creative self, is there a piece of advice that you would give them, being the seasoned veteran that you are?
Boy, that's to me, that's the hardest question that anybody can ask me. I mean, you have to believe in yourself. You have to, I think, give yourself. I believe writers need a good basis in grammar. You have to read a lot of other books of other writers, and really be familiar with other writers' style. Know what you like and know what you don't like. But ultimately, it's about just having faith in yourself and in your ability, and knowing, I believe that writing, all good writing is all about rewriting. Whenever I am stumbling on what I'm going to write and feel that I need to do something, I will just write it. And so if it comes out bad, it comes out bad. Who cares? Tomorrow I can reread it and change it and make it better. It's all about making things better. And when you have that attitude and that belief, I think you can. It takes a lot of the fear away, and and you can create. Eventually, you'll find your own voice. And a voice that is true, and that's all you have to do, is be true to yourself and honest with yourself and write honestly. You have to hope that other people will respond positively. But the most important thing in writing is that you are writing, that you are creating, and you never really know what that is doing inside you, how that is, but it is helping you. And if your books don't get published, and if your plays don't get done, that's a whole other area to deal with. But the important thing is to write and to create.
I couldn't agree more. The saying is true for a reason that you can't edit a blank page.
Right.
Having words to edit is way better than nothing at all.
Mm-hmm.
For sure. John, I love the book. I love what you're doing. Thank you so much for taking time to come on the show.
Thank you for talking to me. I so appreciate it.
If people want to look into all the work that you've done, where can they find you online?
They can find me. They can go to my website, which is www.johnpielmeier.com. That's JohnPielmeier.com. And that has a website of everything I've written and my comments about everything that I've written. And it's a website that I'm pretty pleased with. So,
excellent. We're going to send everybody to see you. Thanks for coming on the show, John.
Thank you so much. I so appreciate your help here and your good questions. Thanks.
Thanks for listening to the Author Stories podcast. For more great author interviews like this one, go to hankgarner.com and dig through the archives. There's something there I know you'll love. Now stay tuned for a special audio clip from Richard Gleaves' The Jason Crane series.
His body broke free of its paralysis, and he stumbled forward, losing his balance. He fell down the slope towards the spot where they had been. His hand shot out unthinkingly, and he grabbed the corner of the black stone bridge. Hoofbeats. Pounding hoofbeats. Coming closer. Coming up the road. Someone or something galloped towards him. The head of an emaciated horse burst from the gloom of the road. The rider was fumbling, out of control, without saddle or bridle, clutching at the white mane, kicking the beast across the hindquarters with his thin legs, his face a frozen mask of terror. He whipped around to look back over his shoulder. Something chased him. Something terrible. Jason spun away as the horse ran over him, spearing him through the chest with its iron-shod hooves. He was unhurt. The horse galloped upward and across the bridge, across strong timbers, rough-hewn and knot-holed. The rider wheeled the horse about, looking back from the far shore. He was wheezing. A sloppy, white ruffle bobbed under his chin. His face was hopeful now. A familiar face, much like the one Jason saw every morning in the mirror. Something thundered up behind Jason, not with a clatter of hoofbeats, but with the teeth-rattling thunder of stone on stone. Ichabod, yes, of course, the man was Ichabod, wailed, and the sound of his terror echoed across the valley. The hot breath of a horse burned the back of Jason's neck. He stood frozen, unable to turn his head to see the thing behind him. He didn't want to. This was no ordinary vision. He felt with certainty that the rider behind him, no, the horseman behind him, knew he was there. Ichabod kicked his horse. It reared, brayed, and would have thrown him but for the fistfuls of its mane he clutched. Horse and rider spun in place on the far side of the bridge, disoriented. The horseman behind Jason laughed, a terrible, deep, cracking sound from all directions like 1,000 axes chopping down the woods. Jason felt searing heat as a ball of flame whipped over his shoulder. A burning jack-o'-lantern arced across the bridge. Its maniacal face spun end over end. It grinned back at Jason for an instant, spun around and crashed into Ichabod's temple, knocking him from his horse and into the dust. The pumpkin careened upwards, exploding against the trees, shooting tendrils of flame up their trunks, igniting branches and showering the world with sparks and flaming leaves. Jason recoiled, fell to his knees, and threw his arms over his face. His lungs and heart pumped wildly. They slowed. He brought his arms down. The bridge was broken again. It was over.